Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take source material you've shared with us. Could be articles, book chapters, notes, anything really. And we unpack it.
Yeah, we dig into the important bits, the surprising things, try and give you those aha moments without you having to wade through everything yourself.
Exactly. Today, we're jumping back into a topic that, honestly, you've told us you really enjoy. Scotland's ancient clans. This time, we're focusing entirely on Clan Graham, based on some great excerpts a listener sent in from a specific book.
And this actually fits into a bigger picture we've been exploring. All this material comes from the Ancient Clans of Scotland series. It's a really solid resource, full of the kind of detail that, brings it all to
It
light.
really is. And because these clan deep dives have been so popular, we wanted to make sure you know where this great info is coming from. It's the Ancient Clans of Scotland series. We've put a link to buy the book in the description for this deep dive. Seriously, it's a fantastic gift idea, for someone who's hard to buy for, or anyone with Scottish roots, or just loves history. You can explore loads more clans, just like we're doing with the Grahams today.
It's very thorough, covers a lot of ground.
So, based on the material we've got, our plan today is to explore the origins, the history, the structure, which is pretty unique, the symbols, and the legacy of Clan Graham.
And one thing that really stands out in the source material is their position sort of bridging the highlands and the lowlands. That duality shapes so much of their story.
Right, that tension or balance, as you said. Okay, let's start with the absolute basics from our source, what actually was a clan in Scotland.
Mhm.
We tend to think it's just blood relatives, right?
Yeah, but the source explains it's a bit more complex. The word clan does mean children in Gaelic, but the system grew beyond just immediate family.
How so?
Well, while there might be a founding figure, people also joined for protection, maybe through marriage or if they got land from the chief. Or sometimes they just swore loyalty, and over time, these folks became totally part of the clan, same identity, same fortunes.
So less about pure DNA and more about kinship, loyalty to the chief, and this idea of mutual support,
Hmm.
like a safety net.
Exactly. A safety net, a military unit, a political group, all rolled into one. Especially important in, let's face it, a pretty harsh environment sometimes.
And that needed structure to work, I guess.
Absolutely. The source lays it out. At the very top, you had the chief. For the Grahams, that was Ongrumach Mór in Gaelic. Their authority came from lineage, yeah, but also leadership, being able to command that loyalty.
And below the chief.
You had chieftains heading up the main branches, often managing specific areas, and then really importantly, the taxmen. These guys were almost like sub-landlords. They held big chunks of land from the chief, managed the tenants, collected dues, and crucially, raised men for fighting when needed. It was all about reciprocal duties flowing up and down.
And the symbols. The source mentions crests, mottos, and tartans becoming really significant later on.
Tartans became huge, especially after the ban following Clodagh was lifted. Wearing your clan tartan wasn't just fashion, it was a bold statement. A visible link to your history, your people, your land, like wearing your identity.
The source also gives these little glimpses into everyday life, the community feel, sharing food, the music, the storytelling. It paints a picture where cooperation was just essential, made life bearable, maybe even enjoyable, despite the challenges.
Yeah, it wasn't just about land or war, it was their whole social world, their cultural universe, everything.
Okay, let's unpack the origins of Clan Graham specifically. The source kicks off with this amazing legendary story. A warrior named Graham supposedly breaks through the Antonine Wall way back around 400 AD.
Yeah, Graham's Dyke, they supposedly called it after him. It's brilliant folklore, isn't it?
But probably not strictly historical.
Well, historians point out the name Graham came much, much later, so yes, symbolic. But it became a key foundation myth for the clan. It paints them as ancient, strong, barrier breakers, that kind of thing. It speaks to their enduring image.
So if that's the legend, what's the more accepted historical origin story from the source material?
That takes us to the 12th century. The name actually comes from an English place, Grantham, means something like gravel homestead.
Grantham. So English roots.
Originally, yes. It came to Scotland with a knight named William de Graham. He was one of those Anglo-Norman guys King David I brought north with him. David wanted to modernize Scotland, establish royal control, so he granted lands to families like the Grahams. William got lands near Edinburgh, Dalkeith, Abercorn.
And de Graham became the surname.
Exactly, meaning from Graham. And in Gaelic, it became Grumach. So Norman roots established in Scotland in the 1100s.
That's a pretty significant detail from the source, shifting from ancient Picts to 12th century Normans.
It is, but they became Scottish very quickly, fully integrated. William de Graham is right there witnessing the charter for Holyrood Abbey in 1128. Shows they were already involved at court, in the church. By the late 1200s, they were major barons.
And the source really emphasizes their loyalty during the Wars of Independence, a tough time for Scotland.
Oh, hugely important and costly for the Grahams. Sir Patrick de Graham died fighting at Dunbar in 1296.
And Sir John de Graham, he sounds like a major figure.
Absolutely. The source calls him one of William Wallace's closest allies. Fought and died heroically right beside Wallace at Falkirk in 1298. His tombstone there is apparently quite something, a real symbol of resistance.
Wow.
Yeah, these sacrifices didn't go unnoticed. Robert the Bruce granted them lands after Bannockburn, cementing their place in the kingdom.
So they rose from these Norman origins, proved their loyalty, and became key players. The source traces this rise, mentioning Sir William de Graham.
Yes, their influence just kept growing. Sir John cemented their fighting reputation. Sir David Graham got the lands of Old Montrose from Bruce that became a really key power base for them in the East.
And then some big moments elevated them even further.
Definitely. The source points to Sir Patrick Graham marrying Euphemia Stuart. That was massive because it eventually brought the earldom of Menteith into the family line through their son, Malise.
Ah, strategic marriage.
Very. Then Patrick Graham becomes Lord Graham in 1445, entering the top tier of nobility. Getting Mugdock Castle in 1372 was also huge. A major stronghold near Stirling gave them clout in the west.
And it all leads up to...
William Graham becomes the first Earl of Montrose in 1503. But the source really flags James Graham, the first Marquess of Montrose, in the 17th century as the dramatic peak. His military campaigns were legendary, brilliant general, though ultimately a tragic figure.
Okay, this is where it's really interesting, tying back to what you said about them bridging highlands and lowlands. The source stresses their adaptability.
This seems to be their superpower, really. They weren't just Highland chiefs or just lowland lords. They understood both worlds. Clan loyalty, Gaelic traditions, they got that. But they also mastered lowland feudal law, court politics, diplomacy.
So they could play both sides almost, or operate effectively in both spheres.
Pretty much. This dual nature let them navigate really complex situations, shifting alliances. They could operate at the royal court, make smart marriages, fight battles in Scotland, or even on the continent.
And their symbols reflect this.
The source suggests so. That crest the falcon attacking a store, it's aggressive, yes, signifies martial skill. But maybe also sharp strategy overcoming obstacles, and the motto, Ni Obli, do not forget.
Do not forget.
It's a constant reminder. Remember your history, your duties, your ancestors. In a world of shifting loyalties, that focus on legacy and remembrance was probably vital for keeping them prominent. It's this mixed resilience, foresight, loyalty that the source says really sustained them.
Let's dive into this specific structure of Clan Graham then, because the source says it was this blend of feudal lordship and traditional clan ways. How did that work?
Well, at the very top, you have the chief, Andrew Mackmore, who is also the Duke of Montrose. He held power both as a feudal noble and as the traditional clan chief, a dual role.
Okay, and under him?
Chieftains leading the big branches, often managing specific territories, almost like mini chiefs in their own right.
And how did they handle all the land and people? That seems complex.
It was a mix. You had the tacksmen, like we mentioned, leasing land in the traditional clan way, managing tenants. But for the big estates like Mugdock or later Buchanan, you'd also have more formal estate managers. There was the mayor, like a steward or administrator running the estate business, and foresters managing hunting grounds. It's traditional roles fitting into a more structured feudal system.
What about the military setup?
You had the core fighters, the clan warrior elite, often called the Fine, usually related Grahams, top warriors loyal to the chief, then military commanders leading troops in battle, and the Gilquois, the chief's personal bodyguards. Always close. Very important.
And preserving the history, the identity?
That was crucial. You had bards, poets, singers, celebrating clan victories, the chief's line, Shanakis, the historians and genealogists, keepers of the lineage, the traditions, like living encyclopedias for the clan.
Oh.
And pipers and harpers, of course, for music at gatherings, marches, ceremonies. These roles were vital for that collective memory.
And the vast majority of people. The everyday clan members.
The common clanspeople.
Yeah.
Farmers, tradesmen, soldiers, when needed, the common clansmen. Then crofters, small tenant farmers, and cotters, who were basically landless laborers. They were the foundation, providing food, labor, manpower.
And the source mentions this unbroken line of chiefs right down to the present Duke of Montrose. That's pretty incredible continuity.
It really is. Shows how adaptable they were. The world changed around them. But that core leadership, that loyalty, even if expressed differently over time, it just endured.
Okay, let's talk about the heartland, the lands and castles. Dalkeith was the start, but where did they really put down roots according to the source?
Dalkeith was early, yeah, but Mugdock Castle near Milngavie, that was the main seat for centuries, from 1372 to 1680. Hugely strategic, controlling routes between lowlands and highlands. Took a few beatings and sieges. Now it's mostly ruins and a park, but the source suggests it's full of history and maybe ghosts.
Kincardine Castle didn't fare so well, it seems.
No, acquired early on, 13th century, another key spot near Auchterarder. But it got destroyed in 1646 during the Civil War. By the Campbells? Direct result of that big feud we'll get to. Just earthworks left now. A bit sad, really.
And Inchtala. An island?
Yeah, on the Lake of Menteith. A ruin now. But it was the seat of the Earls of Menteith, that important branch of the Grahams. Shows their power base in that central area. And Old Montrose, the land grant from Robert the Bruce, gave them that crucial foothold over in Angus.
The source mentions later seats, too, like Buchanan Castle.
Right, built much later, mid-19th century, became the chief seat after Mugdock. Got that weird WWII history, hospital, Rudolf Hess briefly staying there. Now it's this grand ruin.
Strange detour for Hess.
Isn't it just? And Gartmore House shows another side, home to Robert Graham of Gartmore, big figure in the Scottish Enlightenment. So not just warriors and landowners, but involved in intellectual life too.
And castles linked to other branches, cadet branches.
Yeah, Mains Castle near Dundee belongs to the Grahams of Fintry, pretty well-preserved 16th century tower house. And Claypot's Castle, also near Dundee, strongly linked to John Graham of Claverhouse, Bonnie Dundee.
They were spread out, even down on the borders.
Definitely. The Border Grahams held Netherby Hall, just over the border in Cumberland. Shows that whole receiver history. Then there's Airth Castle, linked to the Menteith line, now a hotel, apparently haunted by a green lady, according to the source's local tale.
What green lady?
And Dundaff Castle Ruin, reputed birthplace of Sir John de Graham, adds another layer.
It sounds like visiting these places today, even the ruins, you could really connect with their story.
Absolutely. Seeing the actual places, it makes the history feel much more real, more tangible. You get a sense of their presence across Scotland.
So the Grahams had these influential branches. Let's run through the main ones mentioned in the source.
Okay, first, the chief line, Graham of Montrose. Rose through the ranks, Earl, Marcus, finally Duke. That's the main stem. Then Graham of Menteith, powerful through that maternal link to the earldom. Big players in central Scotland for a long time.
And Claverhouse. That name rings a bell for many.
John Graham of Claverhouse, Viscount Dundee, Bonnie Dundee, from the branch near Dundee. His Jacobite leadership, especially at Killiecrankie, legendary status, even though he died in the battle. Huge figure in Scottish history and folklore.
What about Fintry and Netherby?
Fintry, based at Mains Castle, had continental connections, known for Catholic links during the Reformation. Netherby, they were the Border Grahams, notorious reavers, raiding, feuding until the crown cracked down hard.
And Gartmore.
They produced figures like the Enlightenment writer we mentioned, shows a different path. And then you have branches like Inchbrakie and Oracle giving rise to figures like Black Pate, more local Perthshire legends.
The source also talks about associated names or septs. What exactly is a sept? How does that work?
Right. The source explains a sept is basically a family or group historically linked to a clan, but maybe not sharing the surname or a direct blood tie.
So not Grahams themselves necessarily.
Not always by name or direct descent. The link could be living on clan lands, fighting for the chief, marriage, or just seeking protection. They became part of the clan's sphere of influence.
So it shows clans were more complex than just big families.
Exactly. They were social and political units. Chiefs expanded their power by bringing these allied or dependent families into the fold.
The source lists a whole load of sept names. We can't cover them all, but it's interesting seeing names like Airth or Mugdock coming directly from Graham lands.
Yeah, or names like Cowan, Leitch, Tailure, maybe representing tenants or families with specific skills living on Graham estates. Border families like Bunton seeking protection. It shows the diversity within the wider clan community.
It really paints a picture of allegiance and location being just as important as blood, maybe more so sometimes.
That's a good way to put it. Identity was flexible.
Okay, let's shift to the visuals, the symbols of Clan Graham. The source describes the clan crest badge, a falcon preying on a stork inside the motto belt. That sounds pretty fierce.
It is. The source interprets it as symbolizing fearlessness, dominance, their martial reputation. It's a bold statement of pride and prowess, not subtle.
And the plant badge,
Laurel.
the laurel or bay leaf, linked to victory, honor, achievement, fits well with warriors and poets. Think Montrose, Claverhouse, heroes celebrated in history and song.
What about the heraldic arms? Gold shield, black chief at the top, 3 gold escallops. Those shell shapes.
Yeah, the escallops or scallop shells. The source connects them to pilgrimage, service, loyalty. They appear really early on. Graham arms suggests a history of dedicated service, purposeful action.
And music. The clan pipe tune is Killy Cranky.
A very spirited tune, directly referencing Bonnie Dundee's famous, though fatal, victory. The source also mentions Montrose's March, a lament tied to the Marquess and his campaigns, more solemn.
And the chief's Gaelic title, and Grumach Moor.
The Great Graham. The source points out this is significant. It links the chief, despite Norman and Lowland roots, firmly to a Highland identity, reinforces that dual nature again. Let's revisit that powerful motto. No woobly, French for do not forget.
Yeah, the source frames it as a real guiding principle. French mottos were common for nobles of Norman descent, but for the Grahams, with their history of drama, sacrifice, resilience, do not forget feels particularly potent. Remember ancestors, duty, history, loyalty.
It connects strongly with the crest, the history,
Absolutely. A constant reminder of who they were, where they came from.
and the clan battle cry. The source says Montrose, not a Gaelic cry.
Apparently not. No specific Gaelic one is recorded. Instead, they rallied to Montrose, shouting the name of the first Marquess, their legendary general. It was about allegiance, identity, defiance, all wrapped up in his name.
Finally, tartans. The source describes the main ones. Graham of Montrose.
That's seen as the primary one, linked to the chief. Deep green, navy blue, red, white. The source suggests the colors reflect their lands, maybe the blood shed in battles. There's even a story linking a red version to a tartan gifted to Montrose before his execution. Adds that tragic romance element.
And Graham of Menteith.
That one's different. More muted, hunting style colors, browns, greens, grays, blues. Reflects the landscape of the Menteith region where that major branch was based.
The source mentions other versions too. Ancient, modern, weathered, dress.
Yeah, those are mostly about the look different dye techniques, giving brighter colors, modern, softer tones, ancient weathered, or specific versions for formal occasions. Dress, same basic patterns, just different vibes.
Right. Now for the really spooky stuff. The source gets into supernatural tales linked to Clan Graham. Let's start with the Grey Lady of Mugdock Castle.
Ah, yes, the classic castle ghost. The source describes her as this sorrowful figure in gray, supposedly a noblewoman locked up there in the 17th century. People report cold spots, footsteps, seeing her weeping.
Eerie.
And apparently, finding a skeleton walled up in the castle back in the early 20th century didn't exactly dampen the stories.
I bet. Then there's the Curse of Graham's Dyke. That sounds ominous.
It ties right back to that origin legend of breaching the Antonine Wall. The lore says disturbing the ancient wall brought a curse. No Graham shall die in peace, nor rest in bed.
Wow.
And the source notes how folklore connects this to the violent or dramatic ends of famous Grahams, Sir John at Falkirk, Montrose executed, that factor on the island, suggesting this pattern of unrest or unhappy fates.
The Phantom Piper of Montrose's March, that sounds incredibly atmospheric.
Doesn't it? The story goes, Piper composed this lament for Montrose's fallen men. On the night before Montrose was reburied with honor in 1661, this ghost piper supposedly played the tune near his tomb.
Spooky.
And ever since, especially on misty nights, the source says people hear this haunting pipe music near Montrose memorials. No piper visible, just the tune, the cursed piper doomed to play forever.
And the ghostly prisoner of Factors Island, linked to Rob Roy.
Yeah, during that feud, Rod Roy nabbed Montrose's factor, Graham of Killern, and stuck him on this island in Loch Katrine. The local folklore in the source claims his spirit is still there. Strange lights, phantom footsteps, a figure in 18th century clothes.
Did he die there?
Nobody knows for sure. Maybe broken by the ordeal, maybe worse. But the story says his ghost remains.
The source lists a few other snippets of lore too.
Yeah, brief mentions. A prophecy about a Graham marriage ending the Menteith male line. The rumor of Rudolf Hess haunting Buchanan Castle, phantom horsemen near Falkirk battlefield, maybe Sir John de Graham's troop. The Graham Light, a blue flame omen near graves, a whispering wall at Mugdock, a cursed chalice linked to Claverhouse, Rob Roy's shadow bothering Graham's near Loch Lomond, and the Menteith owl is a death omen for that branch.
It's quite a collection. Whether you believe them or not, they definitely add color to the clan's story.
They absolutely do. Reflects how people process these intense events, weaving them into the landscape and the legends.
Okay, shifting from ghosts to gritty reality blood feuds. The source details some major conflicts involving Clan Graham.
Their most famous, most defining feud has to be with Clan Campbell during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, mid-17th century. It was personal and political. Montrose leading the Royalists, Argyll leading the Covenanters.
So more than just clan rivalry, it was part of the Civil War.
Exactly. Montrose pulled off incredible victories like Inverlochy in 1645, crushing the Campbells on their own turf. But the Campbells hit back hard, burning Graham lands, destroying Kincardine Castle in 46.
And the ending.
Dramatic. Montrose captured and executed in 1650, but then, poetic justice from a Graham view perhaps, Argyll himself was executed in 1661 after the Restoration, a feud that really mirrored the national turmoil.
Then there's the famous one with Clan MacGregor involving Rob Roy.
Ah yes, early 18th century. Became legendary. Started simply enough, Rob Roy defaulted on a cattle loan from the Duke of Montrose. Big oops. The Duke used his legal power, seized Rob Roy's lands. Rob Roy fought back guerrilla style, raiding the Duke's lands, famously capturing the Duke's factor on Factor's Island in 1716.
That's where the ghost story comes from.
That's the one. And the source notes how this cemented Rob Roy as the folk hero fighting oppression, while the Duke often gets cast as the villain. The feud eventually died down. Rob Roy got a pardon, but the story lives on.
And the Border Grahams were always in feuds down there.
Oh yeah. The borders were a different world. Constant raiding. The Netherby Grahams clashed endlessly with neighbors like the Armstrongs, Elliots, Maxwells, cattle rustling, ambushes, the lot.
Until the government stepped in.
After the Union of the Crowns in 1603, the government had enough. Cracked down hard, deported many Border Grahams to Ulster in Ireland. Basically broke their power base there. Ended that reaving culture.
The source even mentions conflict within Clan Graham.
Yes, a significant rivalry between the main Montrose line and the Menteith branch in the early 17th century. The Earl of Menteith made a claim to the older earldom of Strathern, which really annoyed King Charles I and caused a big rift with Montrose. Not outright war like with the Campbells, but serious political division within the clan.
It's clear Clan Graham was deeply involved in Scotland's military history. The source lists battle after battle.
They were everywhere, across centuries. Dunbar, 1296, Sir Patrick fell. Falkirk, 1298, Sir John fell with Wallace. Bannockburn, 1314, supported Bruce, got rewarded. Souchiburn, fighting for the king.
But they took heavy hits too, like at Flodden.
Flawed in 1513, a disaster for Scotland. The first Earl of Montrose was killed there. And Pinkie Cleugh, 1547, another defeat. The Master of Montrose slain, high stakes, high losses.
And then Montrose's incredible run during the Civil War.
His campaigns in the 1640s were something else. Tippermuir, Aberdeen, Inverlochy against the Campbells, Aldern, Alford, Kilsyth's greatest win, briefly gave him control of Scotland. Just stunning victories, often against the odds.
But it couldn't last forever.
No. Philiphaugh was a major defeat. And his final attempt ended at Carbisdale in 1650. Capture, execution. A very dramatic end.
Jumping ahead to the Jacobite times.
Bonnie Dundee's victory and death at Killiecrankie in 1689. Then in 1715, the Grahams, under the Duke of Montrose, were actually fighting for the government at Sheriffmuir.
Interesting switch.
Shows their political alignment by then. And again, in 1746, during the 45, Graham loyalists were with the government forces, including at Falkirk Muir just before Culloden.
Which brings us to Culloden itself, 1746. Where did Clan Graham stand?
The source material is clear. They were firmly loyal to the British Hanoverian government. The chief, James Graham, 2nd Duke of Montrose, was a powerful Lowland noble and a strong supporter of King George II, same stance as in 1715.
So the Duke was actively involved against the Jacobites.
Yes, the source says he used his influence to help the government suppress the rising, helped with recruitment, provided intelligence, worked with the Duke of Cumberland's army.
So while many Highland clans fought for Bonnie Prince Charlie,
the Grahams were on the government side. Grahams did fight at Culloden, but the source clarifies they were part of the government army units and militias, not fighting as a distinct Graham clan regiment charging across the field.
and the outcome of backing the winning side.
Hugely important for them. They avoided all the punishments handed out to the Jacobite clans after Culloden. No forfeited estates, title secure, status intact. They kept their power and position when many others lost everything, a strategic choice that paid off.
Okay, let's wrap up with some of the really unique, maybe strange facts about the Grahams from the source. These are always fun.
They definitely add some quirky dimensions, like the seventh Duke serving as a government minister in Rhodesia in the 20th century got nicknamed the African Duke.
An African Duke. And the Rudolf Hess connection at Buchanan Castle, Hitler's deputy, held there in secret after flying to Scotland in 41. Just bizarre.
Isn't it? No wonder there are ghost stories. And completely different, the source says part of the Mugdock estate had a private zoo in the 1950s, including elephants.
Elephants. At Mugdock.
Yeah.
You really wouldn't expect that in Stirlingshire. As the source says, Highland lairds didn't do things by halves.
Then there's the tartan on the moon. Apollo 15 astronaut James Irwin, who had Graham roots, apparently took a piece of Graham tartan with him.
Wow, space tartan. And in films, the source notes the Duke of Montrose is the main antagonist in the movie Rob Roy. That feud really stuck.
It certainly shaped their image. And back to symbols that falcon and stork crest being unusually aggressive for heraldry, bold.
Sir Walter Scott wrote A Legend of Montrose about the first Marquess.
And their global reach famous descendants like Billy Graham, the evangelist, and Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone. Both traced roots back to those emigrated Scots-Irish Grahams.
It's clear the Graham story didn't stop at Scotland's shores. The diaspora is huge. Where did that start?
The source points to that forced exile of the Border Grahams to Ulster, Ireland, early 1600s. That was the first big move.
And later emigration. Why did they leave?
All the usual reasons, really. War, poverty, political tension, seeking opportunities in the colonies, military service. Grahams, being adaptable, often did well in new lands.
Where did they end up?
North America was huge. The source mentions the Carolinas, Nova Scotia, Ontario. Lots of loyalists went to Canada after the American Revolution. Huge numbers of people with Graham ancestry in the U.S. and Canada today.
And the Caribbean. Jamaica?
Yeah, surprisingly common surname there, 38th most common, linked to planters, loyalists, and also formerly enslaved people taking the name.
Australia, New Zealand, too.
Settlers, soldiers, gold seekers in the 19th century. Robert Graham was a notable politician in NZ Grahamstown in South Africa named after one. They really got around the empire.
So the name is genuinely global now.
It really is. And the source mentions DNA studies show diverse origins among modern Grahams, reflecting the Norman founders, Highland-Lowland mix, border reavers, all those septs folded in over centuries.
And this global family stays connected through clan Graham societies.
Yes, the source lists active societies in the U.S., Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Scotland itself. They work to preserve the heritage, help with genealogy, organize gatherings, Highland Games attendance, and keep that motto, Ne oublie, alive, do not forget. The source gives contact details for anyone interested.
Wow, what a journey. From legends of breaking Roman walls, Norman knights, fierce feuds, Civil War heroes, haunted castles, global migration, tartan on the moon, even elephants. Clan Graham has quite the story.
It really does. Their history touches on so many key themes of Scotland adaptability, loyalty, conflict, the blending of cultures, and how identity travels across the world.
It really makes you think about how much history and meaning can be packed into just a name, a motto, a pattern of cloth.
Definitely.
So thinking about everything we've explored from the source today, what part of the Graham story really grabbed you? Were there any surprises? Maybe you have a connection to the clan or these places yourself.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with, sparked by the source material. We talked about that curse of Graham's Dyke lore and the pattern of prominent Grahams meeting dramatic, often violent ends. Sir John at Falkirk, Montrose on the scaffold, the Factor on the island. Was it just coincidence? Bad luck? Or, as the source hints, did the clan's constant involvement in high-stakes conflict and politics inevitably push its leaders towards these dramatic, often tragic conclusions? Something to ponder.
That is a thought-provoking question. And just a reminder, all this fascinating detail came from the Ancient Clans of Scotland series. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Grahams, definitely check out the link in the description to get the book. It's a brilliant way to explore more clan histories, and like we said, makes a really thoughtful gift for the history buff in your life, or that person who's just impossible to buy for.
A great resource.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Clan Graham. If you've got source material on a topic you're curious about, send it our way for a future exploration.
Until next time, keep digging deep.